Hi, today we are talking to Carolyn Mullet. Hi.
Hello.
You are visiting Lithuania today and it's really great to see you here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Today I'd like to ask a few questions to Carolyn, and starting with her story. You are a designer and you have a design company and you organize garden tours around the world. How did you start that?
Well, my garden tour company came out of my Facebook page. I have a Facebook page that's called Garden Design by Carolyn Mullet, and over the years I got many followers, over almost 1.5 million from around the world.
I'm one of those.
Well, thank you. Good. And it was really exciting for me to be in contact with so many people from around the world. And I started thinking that maybe it would be really lovely and exciting to also introduce people to gardens from around the world. I started my Facebook page because I felt that there was such great garden design being done that no one ever knew about, that people had not heard beyond their little small area, and I felt it would be really an important thing if I would introduce this wide audience that I had to garden designers and ideas about gardening from around the world. So I started my tour company, and now I take small groups, mainly from the United States, but there are sometimes people from Australia, from European countries like Sweden, Greece, England, and we gather together in a particular place, and then we go from garden to garden for about 7 or 8 days.
Oh, that sounds really great. Which tour did you like most by yourself personally? Was there any special tour for you?
Oh my, there are so many. That's a very hard question.
Okay.
I think perhaps for me personally, the most exciting work has been the work of PIET OUDOLF, and actually meeting him in his garden and seeing some of the projects that he has done in Europe. I had seen his work at the Lurie Garden in Chicago, and I had also seen the High Line in New York City. But to see the projects that he's done in Europe was, to me, very exciting. That was one highlight. And he is such a gracious man and so generous with his information that every time I take a tour there, it is fantastic.
It's a gift.
It is a gift. It's a lovely gift. And we have just found out, just as a little side note, that there will be no more open gardens at Mr. OUDOLF's Humelo garden after next year. So next year will be the final time. And I will be taking another group there or two. I'm not sure yet how many. And then, but we will have wonderful memories. And you know, he's getting older. They want to lead a more private life and do some other things besides having to have their garden open to people. So I completely am sympathetic to him closing his garden. But it does mean that next year will be the final.
So many gardens around the world, and there are so many beautiful gardens that you share on your Facebook page. Is there any which you visited and that was really exciting for you, surprisingly, maybe shocking or unexpected for you at all?
There was one in England. It was a tour on which we were going to arts and crafts gardens especially designed by Gertrude JEKYLL, who was in the early 20th century, a very big garden figure, you know, a big reputation, many books, you know, design work, all of that. And she worked with EDWIN LUTYENS, an architect. And so we were seeing a number of those gardens. We went to one that was called FALLY Farm. And FALLY Farm was an early 20th century house, garden. The garden architecture was by LUTYENS, and the plantings were by GERTRUDE JEKYLL. The new owners had decided they wanted to bring in Dan PEARSON, who is an English designer that I greatly admire. Well, I was not exactly prepared for how absolutely lovely his 21st century plantings were in a setting that was actually 20th century. So an early 20th century garden form, and then he brings his sensibility to it. There is a sunken garden with rounded steps. You go down perhaps 6 feet, maybe a little more, and you're completely enclosed. And there were these extremely exciting naturalistic plantings by Dan PEARSON. It took my breath away. I had never seen anything quite so dramatic and just lovely in every way. And made me admire all three of those designers even more, because obviously the early 20th century form and structure of the garden had lasted through this and was just as good as the day they did it, and yet bringing naturalistic plantings of the 21st century to it was equally exciting. It was lovely. I hope many people get to see that garden.
I'd like to see just after what you were saying now.
I think you would enjoy it.
I'd love that. Carolyn, you're from United States and you travel around the world, and how do you see the difference of gardening traditions in the United States and in the Europe?
I think in the United States, I'm sorry to say, there is not as strong a gardening tradition. I think in Europe there are very, very, very skilled homeowners who manage their gardens, maybe get a little help from a professional designer, but they live in just gorgeous garden spaces. And it is due to their excellent gardening skills that they are able to do this. They have a vision, they are talented, and even though in the United States we do have people like that, it is not as important to our culture as it is to Europeans. And I have found that just fascinating. And so I feel very fortunate that I can actually see those gardens and connect with those gardeners.
Here in Lithuania, we like to grow not only decorative function, flowers, etc., but also edible plants. How do you see that?
In comparison to the United States?
Yeah.
Or in well, it's definitely a trend in the United States. For many years, people did not do much vegetable growing or fruit growing, but now the younger generation, more interested in large farm produced vegetables and fruits, are starting to grow a great deal
by themselves in
their own
gardens.
And that is how they're coming to gardening, to grow vegetables and fruit. And they are less interested in like flowers, and although I'm sure as they go along they will become interested, but right now they want to have healthy food for their families. And it's a huge trend, so that the millennial generation, which is what we call the current generation coming up, that is where they really are interested in gardening. And it's a really terrific thing.
Yeah, it's great.
A lot of urban gardening, which is urban farms in the cities, and balcony gardening, rooftop gardening. So it's a very encouraging trend.
Awesome. Now we are in Lithuania, in Vilnius, in the nursery of RASA LAURINAVIČIENŽ, and here are lots of naturalistic plantings around us. it's not so common here in Lithuania. We have own traditions and we are starting just now to put the first steps into the global, design world. How do you see our potential?
Well, from what I've seen, it's great. It's lovely. I've seen some plantings in Vilnius that were very, very beautiful and certainly well designed. And last evening I was able to see a planting that RASA has done for a client, and that was breathtaking. So I think the potential is great. And the naturalistic trend, I think, can be added to almost any style. You can have a very formal structure. You can have hedges and evergreens, and then you add a little bit of naturalistic perennial and grass planting to it, and it just makes it richer. So I see that as, for countries that are just starting to get into this kind of gardening, it has great potential because it brings wildlife into your garden, the bees that are just behind us and butterflies, and if you have water in your garden, it can bring frogs and all the lovely wildlife that we want to encourage in the world. And so this kind of gardening is particularly good for that. So I'm very pleased to see what you're doing.
That's really nice, because we're taking so many effort in that. We're learning to the design principles, we're learning about gardening trends. Even now in a few days there will be a garden design conference, garden style.
Yes, I heard about that. It sounds wonderful. Well, I think it's very exciting to be at the beginning of a movement, and I think that's what's happening here. And so I can only imagine that it will grow and grow and grow, especially with things like conferences and nursery owners like RASA and designers who are bringing that into their designs. And to see it in the public sphere, in cities, public plantings, all of that contributes to people's awareness of what they can do in their own gardens.
So maybe one day you'll arrange a garden tour
in Lithuania. And absolutely, I would like that. That would be wonderful. Yes.
Oh, that would be really great. So here you can see where you can find Carolyn Mullet Facebook page, and maybe you will take this possibility one day to take a wonderful garden tour with her. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
If you like this video, just press the like button and subscribe to get more of those beautiful videos about gardening. See ya!